Margaret hadn't wanted to spend Christmas at the Lighthouse. 30 years of marriage had taught her when to push back against David's ideas and when to let them run their course. The bed and breakfast in Camden had been her preference. Warm, civilized, a fireplace and other people, and maybe a glass of wine that she didn't have to drink alone while her husband disappeared into another project. But David had that look, the one he got when something took hold of him. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime," he'd said, spreading the documents across their kitchen table. Blueprints, historical records, a photograph of Archer's Point Light, abandoned since 1987, perched on a granite outcrop 2 miles off the Maine coast. "The Historical Society wants a full restoration assessment before spring. They're offering us the contract, Maggie. Us." Us. As if she'd been involved in any of the correspondence. As if her degree in art history somehow qualified her to assess load-bearing walls and electrical systems. But David was a restoration architect, a good one. And Archer's Point was exactly the kind of project that had made him fall in love with the work 40 years ago, before licenses and contracts and liability insurance had turned passion into profession. She'd seen glimpses of that younger David when he talked about the lighthouse. The way his hands moved when he described the original Fresnel lens. The light in his eyes when he explained how the keeper's quarters had been built to withstand hurricanes. So she'd agreed. The boat ride out had been rough. December seas in Maine didn't care about romantic gestures or professional opportunities. Margaret had spent most of the crossing below deck, trying not to be sick, listening to the hulls slam against waves that seemed personally offended by their presence. David had stayed topside with the boat captain, a weathered man named Carl who'd been making supply runs to the offshore islands for 30 years. "Bad time of year for this," Carl had said when they'd arranged the trip. Not a question, not quite a warning, just a statement of fact from someone who understood the ocean didn't negotiate. They'd arrived at Archer's Point as the afternoon light was already failing. December days this far north were brief, grudging things. The sun cleared the horizon around 7, made a low arc across the southern sky, and surrendered by 4. The lighthouse looked worse than the photographs. 37 years of neglect had settled into the structure like a chronic illness. The white paint had gone gray, then black with mold in the places where moisture crept in. Windows on the keeper's quarters were intact but clouded, the glass thick with salt residue. The lighthouse tower itself still stood straight. Those old builders knew what they were doing. But the gallery railing at the top had rusted through in places, leaving gaps like missing teeth. "It's beautiful," David said. Margaret pulled her coat tighter. The wind out here cut straight through wool, straight through skin, down into the bones. "It's something." Carl helped them unload their supplies. Generator, fuel, food for 5 days, space heaters and sleeping bags rated for Arctic conditions because David hadn't trusted the old heating system, and based on what Margaret could see, that was the first sensible decision he'd made about this trip. "I'll be back the 28th, weather permitting. If it gets bad, you've got the radio. Coast Guard can reach you faster than I can." He said it casually, just logistics, but Margaret heard what lived underneath the words. "You're on your own out here. Make good choices." They spent the remaining daylight hours doing a preliminary assessment. David photographed everything, muttering into a voice recorder about structural concerns and preservation priorities. Margaret wandered through the keeper's quarters, trying to imagine the families who had lived here. The lighthouse had been staffed continuously from 1847 to 1987. 140 years of keepers and their wives, their children, their animals. Births and deaths and ordinary days that accumulated into lifetimes. The last keeper had been a man named Samuel Marsh. His name was carved into a wooden plaque by the door, along with all the keepers who came before him. 14 names in total. Some had served for decades, others for just a few years before the isolation or the weather or the simple grinding difficulty of the work drove them back to the mainland. Samuel Marsh had served from 1962 to 1987, 25 years, the longest tenure of any keeper at Archer's Point. "He was here when they automated the light," David said, reading from a folder of historical documents the society had provided. "Stayed on as a civilian caretaker for a few years after. Died in 1991. "On the island?" "No, nursing home in Portland. But they said he never really adjusted. Kept asking to go back." Margaret looked out the window at the gray Atlantic, churning against the rocks below. She couldn't imagine wanting to come back to this. She couldn't imagine how anyone had survived here at all. They found the gift on the morning of December 24th. Margaret had slept poorly. The wind had screamed through gaps in the old walls all night, finding frequencies that sounded almost like voices. David had slept fine. He always did. 30 years, and she still didn't understand how he could sleep through anything while she lay awake cataloging every sound. She'd gotten up early to make coffee on the camp stove. The generator was running, but they were conserving fuel, keeping it mostly for the space heaters and David's equipment. Small luxuries like electric kettles hadn't made the cut. The keeper's quarters were divided into 3 main rooms. The largest served as a combination living area and kitchen, with a wood stove that still worked and a hand pump connected to a cistern that collected rainwater. 2 smaller rooms in the back had been bedrooms. They'd set up camp in the front room, sleeping bags arranged near the space heater, equipment cases stacked against the walls. There was also a cellar. The door was in the kitchen, set into the floor at an angle. David had checked it on their first day, shining his flashlight down the stone steps, confirming it was empty except for some rusted shelving and a century's worth of dust. Margaret was passing the cellar door when she noticed it was open. Not all the way, just a few inches, enough to see darkness below. She stopped. They'd closed that door, latched it. She remembered David doing it, remembered the scrape of the old iron latch sliding into place. David? No answer. He was up in the tower, photographing the lens mechanism. Margaret stood very still. The logical explanation was simple. The latch was old. The door had settled. Gravity and entropy had conspired to pull it open. Nothing mysterious, nothing to worry about. She walked to the door and looked down. The cellar stairs descended into blackness. The morning light from the kitchen windows reached the first 3 steps before giving up. Something was on the 3rd step. Margaret's breath caught. It was a box, small, wrapped in red paper with a green ribbon. The paper was old, faded, but the ribbon still held a bow that someone had tied with care. A Christmas present, sitting on the cellar stairs of an abandoned lighthouse. She didn't touch it. That's not possible. David held the package in his hands, turning it over like he could find an explanation in its construction. The paper was brittle, threatening to crack along the fold lines. The ribbon had once been silk, but had dried out decades ago. "It was just sitting there," Margaret said, "on the stairs." "The cellar was empty. I checked." "I know." They were in the kitchen, gray morning light making everything look provisional and cold. The package sat on the table between them now, too small to be threatening, too impossible to be ignored. There was a tag attached to the ribbon, handwritten in ink that had faded to brown. David had read it, then read it again, then handed it to Margaret without a word. "For David and Margaret, with gratitude for what you will do. S.M. December 24th, 1924. S.M., Margaret said. Samuel Marsh? Samuel Marsh wasn't born until 1934. He was the last keeper, not... David stopped, went to his folder of documents, flipped through pages with hands that weren't quite steady. Margaret watched him, In 30 years, she'd rarely seen David unsettled. He approached problems with methodical calm, breaking them into components, solving them piece by piece. It was what made him good at his job. It was also, she sometimes thought, what made him difficult to live with. Hard to reach a man who saw everything as a puzzle to be solved rather than an experience to be felt. But now his hands were trembling. "Simon Marsh," he said finally. "Samuel's grandfather. He was keeper here from 1919 to 1931. So the gift is from him? From 1924? That's what it says. And it's addressed to us, by name, 100 years before we were born." David didn't answer. He was staring at the package like it had personally offended him, like its existence was an insult to everything he understood about how the world worked. Margaret reached out and picked it up. "Maggie, don't. We're not going to understand it by staring at it." The paper crackled as she unwrapped it, flaking in places, leaving red dust on her fingers. The ribbon fell away in pieces. Inside was a wooden box, hand-carved, about the size of a deck of cards. The lid was fitted so precisely that it took her a moment to find the seam. She opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of cotton that had yellowed with age, was a key. Iron, old, and a folded piece of paper. The letter was dated December 24th, 1924. The handwriting was careful, educated, the script of someone who had learned penmanship when it was still considered a reflection of character. Margaret read it aloud. "To David and Margaret, I know you will not read this for many years. I know also that you will not believe what I am about to tell you. I did not believe it myself when I was in your position. Time at Archer's Point does not move as it does in other places. I do not understand why. I do not think anyone does. But the lighthouse exists in a kind of fold, a place where the years sometimes touch each other like pages in a book pressed too tightly together. I have seen you, both of you. On December 24th, 1924, I saw you standing in the gallery of the lighthouse looking out at the sea. You did not see me. You could not. But I saw you clearly, and I heard you speak each other's names. I know you are here to save this place. I know because I saw the documents you carried, the Historical Society letterhead, the architectural plans. I could not read them in detail, but I understood enough. The key in this box opens a compartment in the base of the lens mechanism. Inside, you will find something I have left for you, for the lighthouse, for whatever comes after us. Do not be afraid. Archer's Point protects its own. It always has. With gratitude, Simon Marsh, Keeper, Archer's Point Light. Margaret set the letter down. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the wind had dropped for the first time since their arrival, as if the island itself was holding its breath. He saw us, she said. In 1924, 100 years ago. He saw us and knew why we were here. David hadn't moved. That's impossible, he said, but his voice had no conviction in it. He was looking at the key in the box, at the letter with its century-old ink, at the wrapping paper that survived longer than most human lives. We should go up to the lens, Margaret said. Maggie. What else are we going to do, David? Pretend we didn't find this? Pretend some perfectly rational explanation is going to appear if we just wait long enough? She was surprised by the sharpness in her own voice. Surprised, too, by the feeling rising in her chest. Not fear exactly, something closer to recognition. Like a part of her had always known that places like this existed, had been waiting her whole life to find one. David looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months, maybe years. "Together," he said finally. "We go together. Together." They climbed the tower stairs with the key between them, rising to whatever Simon Marsh had left behind. The Holbrook family cabin sat on the northern shore of Lake Koshkonong, 3 hours from Milwaukee and about 50 years from anything resembling modern convenience. No cell service, no internet. Heat came from a wood-burning stove that had been old when Ryan's grandfather was young, and water came from a hand pump in the kitchen that groaned like something dying every time you used it. "It's rustic," Ryan had warned her. "Really rustic." Elena had grown up in Chicago. Her idea of rustic was a hotel without room service. But she'd smiled and said it sounded charming because that's what you did when your boyfriend of 6 months invited you home for Christmas. You said yes, you packed warm clothes, you tried not to think too hard about what it meant that he wanted you to meet his family. The drive up had been beautiful, at least. Snow-covered fields giving way to dense pine forests, the roads getting narrower and less maintained the further north they went. Ryan had been nervous the whole way, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, checking the rear-view mirror more often than traffic warranted. "You okay?" she'd asked somewhere around hour 2. "Fine, just my family can be a lot. I want you to be prepared." "I've met families before." "Not like mine." He hadn't elaborated and she hadn't pushed. Everyone thought their family was uniquely difficult. It was practically a universal experience. They arrived at the cabin just as the sun was setting, the sky turning shades of orange and purple that looked almost artificial, like someone had oversaturated a photograph. The lake stretched out behind the cabin, a vast white expanse of ice and snow that seemed to go on forever. 3 other vehicles were already parked in the cleared area beside the cabin. Ryan's parents, his older brother Marcus and his wife, his younger sister Debbie, who'd driven up from Madison. "The whole clan," Ryan muttered, pulling in beside a mud-splattered pickup truck. The cabin door opened before they'd even gotten out of the car, and a woman who had to be Ryan's mother came rushing out, arms already spread for a hug. She was small and energetic, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that were the same shade of pale blue as Ryan's. "You're here! Oh, thank goodness, I was starting to worry about the roads." She pulled Ryan into a crushing embrace, then turned those blue eyes on Elena. "And you must be Elena. We've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope." "Mostly." The woman's smile was warm, but there was something underneath it, something that flickered and disappeared before Elena could identify it. "I'm June. Come inside, come inside. It's freezing out here." The cabin's interior was exactly what Elena had expected. Wooden walls covered with mounted fish and family photographs, furniture that had been old when her parents were born. A Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with ornaments that looked handmade and ancient. A fire crackling in the stone fireplace, filling the room with warmth and the smell of wood smoke. The rest of the family was gathered in the main room. Marcus was a larger, louder version of Ryan, with a beard and a gut that suggested he enjoyed his beer. His wife Terry was quiet and watchful, offering Elena a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Debbie was the youngest, mid-20s, with her mother's energy and her father's size. And then there was the father. Howard Holbrook sat in an armchair by the fire, a glass of something amber in his hand. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and weathered, with hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime doing hard work. He didn't get up when Elena entered, just watched her with eyes that were darker than his children's, set deep in a face that gave nothing away. "So, you're the girlfriend," he said. Not a question. "I'm Elena. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Holbrook." "Howard." He took a sip of his drink. "Ryan says you work in marketing." "Digital marketing, yes, for a healthcare company." Howard nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. "City work." "Dad," Ryan said, a warning in his voice. "Just making conversation. Howard's eyes hadn't left Elena's face. "You ever spent time on a lake in winter?" "I can't say I have. It's different than summer. Quieter. The ice changes things, changes what lives underneath." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You'll see." The conversation moved on after that. Dinner was served, a hearty stew that June had been cooking all day, and the family fell into patterns that Elena could tell were old and well-worn. Stories she didn't have context for, jokes that required decades of shared history to understand. She smiled and nodded and tried not to feel like an outsider, like a specimen being evaluated. It was almost 10 when she noticed the food. June was packing a basket in the kitchen. Not leftovers. This was fresh food, carefully arranged. Raw meat, bread, a jar of something dark that looked like honey but moved too slowly. "What's that for?" Elena asked, coming up beside her. June startled, nearly dropping the jar. "Oh, you surprised me." She laughed, but it was brittle. "It's nothing, just a tradition." "A tradition?" "We leave an offering out on Christmas Eve, for the lake." June's hands were moving quickly now, closing the basket, covering it with a cloth. "It's an old family thing, goes back generations. Probably sounds silly to someone from the city." "No, I think it's nice, like leaving cookies for Santa." June's smile flickered. "Something like that." She took the basket and headed for the back door, the one that faced the lake. Elena watched her go, watched her walk out onto the snow-covered yard and keep walking, toward the ice. "Don't." Elena turned. Debbie was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, arms crossed, face serious. "Don't what?" "Don't ask about it. Don't follow her. Don't watch." The younger woman's voice was flat, rehearsed, like she'd given this speech before. "Just let it be." "Let what be?" Debbie stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without answering. Elena looked back toward the window. June was a small figure now, almost to the edge of the lake. As Elena watched, she knelt down on the ice and opened the basket. She couldn't see what happened next. The window fogged with her breath, and by the time she'd wiped it clear, June was already walking back toward the cabin. The basket was empty. That night, Elena lay awake in the small guest room she was sharing with Ryan. He was asleep beside her, breathing slow and even, untroubled by dreams. She envied him that. Her mind wouldn't stop turning over the day's strange moments. Howard's cryptic comments about the ice, the basket of food, Debbie's warning. And underneath it all, a feeling she couldn't shake, a sense of being watched. The window in their room faced the lake. Elena had drawn the curtains before bed, but now she found herself pushing them aside, looking out at the moonlit expanse of snow and ice. Something was moving out there. She pressed closer to the glass, breath fogging her view, wiped it clear, looked again. At the center of the lake, maybe 200 yards from shore, something dark was crawling across the ice. It was too far away to see clearly, just a shape, low and wrong somehow, moving in a way that didn't match any animal she knew. It would stop, start, change direction, like it was searching for something. Then it stopped. And even from this distance, even through the darkness and the glass, Elena knew it was looking at her. She stumbled back from the window, heart hammering, pulled the curtain shut, stood in the darkness listening to Ryan breathe, trying to convince herself she hadn't seen what she'd seen. Just an animal, a deer or a wolf or something. The darkness playing tricks. She didn't sleep. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds that promised more snow. Elena moved through breakfast like a ghost, barely touching the pancakes June had made, nodding along with conversations she couldn't focus on. Ryan noticed. "You okay?" he asked, catching her arm as they were clearing dishes. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't. Not really. She glanced around, making sure no one else was in earshot. I saw something last night, on the lake. What kind of something? I don't know. An animal, maybe? It was moving on the ice, and then it just stopped and looked at me. Ryan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a wall coming up, a door closing. It was probably just a wolf, he said. They come around sometimes. The food draws them. The food your mom leaves on the ice. It's just a tradition, Elena. That's what she said. What is it really, Ryan? What aren't you telling me? He looked at her for a long moment, and for a second she thought he might actually answer, might actually trust her with whatever secret this family was keeping. Then Marcus's voice boomed from the other room. "Ryan, Dad wants to show Elena the ice house before the snow hits." The moment shattered. Ryan squeezed her hand, gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and turned away. "Come on, you'll want a coat for this." The ice house was a small structure at the edge of the lake, barely more than a shed. In summer, it would have been used to store fish and bait. In winter, apparently, it served a different purpose. Howard was waiting for them inside, standing next to a hole that had been cut in the wooden floor. Through the hole, Elena could see the ice beneath the structure, and through the ice, the dark water below. "The family's been on this lake for 140 years, Howard said without preamble. "My great-great-grandfather built the first cabin, built this ice house too, knew what he was doing." "It's impressive," Elena offered. "It's necessary." Howard looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You see something last night, on the lake?" She hadn't expected the direct question. Yes, I think so." "Good. Means you're paying attention." He pointed at the hole in the floor, at the black water visible beneath the ice. "There are things in this lake that were here before us, before anyone. Old things, hungry things." "Dad?" Ryan said quietly. "She's going to find out anyway. Better she hear it from us than figure it out the hard way." Howard turned back to Elena. "My ancestor, the one who built this place, he made a deal. The things in the lake, they leave us alone. We leave them offerings. Simple arrangement. Been working for generations." Elena looked at Ryan. He wasn't meeting her eyes. "You're serious," she said. "I don't joke about the lake. What are they, these things?" Howard shrugged. "Don't know, don't want to know. My grandfather tried to find out once. Went ice fishing in the middle of the lake where the water runs deep. Stayed out there all night with a lantern, trying to get a good look at one." "What happened?" "They found him the next morning, sitting on his stool, lying still in the water, frozen solid. And his eyes were gone. Something had reached up through the hole and taken them clean out of his head." Elena's stomach turned. That can't be true." "Believe what you want." Howard moved toward the door. "But tonight, when June goes out to leave the offering, you stay inside. You don't watch, you don't follow, and whatever you hear, you don't open any doors until morning." He left. Ryan started to follow. "Ryan!" Elena grabbed his arm. "Is any of that true?" "Dad?" Ryan said quietly. "She's going to find out anyway. Better she hear it from us than figure it out the hard way." Howard turned back to Elena. "My ancestor, the one who built this place, he made a deal. The things in the lake, they leave us alone. We leave them offerings. Simple arrangement. Been working for generations." Elena looked at Ryan. He wasn't meeting her eyes. "You're serious," she said. "I don't joke about the lake. What are they, these things?" Howard shrugged. "Don't know, don't want to know. My grandfather tried to find out once. Went ice fishing in the middle of the lake where the water runs deep. Stayed out there all night with a lantern, trying to get a good look at one." "What happened?" "They found him the next morning, sitting on his stool, lying still in the water, frozen solid. And his eyes were gone." Something had reached up through the hole and taken them clean out of his head. Elena's stomach turned. That can't be true. Believe what you want. Howard moved toward the door. But tonight, when June goes out to leave the offering, you stay inside. You don't watch, you don't follow, and whatever you hear, you don't open any doors until morning. He left. Ryan started to follow. Ryan! Elena grabbed his arm. Is any of that true? Through a gap in the curtains, she watched June walk down to the lake, watched her step onto the ice, watched her walk further out than last night, until she was just a small, dark shape against the white. June knelt, opened the basket, began laying out the offering. And then Elena saw them, rising from holes in the ice, crawling up from the black water beneath. 4 of them. 5. More. They were pale, wrong, bodies that bent in too many places, limbs too long, heads that swiveled in ways that made Elena's stomach lurch. They moved toward June in jerky, stuttering motions, surrounding her on the ice. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. June didn't run, didn't scream, just kept her head down, eyes on the ice, as those things circled her. One of them bent close, sniffing at her hair. Another pawed through the offering, making sounds that Elena could hear even through the glass. Wet, clicking, hungry sounds. Then June stood, bowed her head, and walked back toward shore. The things let her go. They watched her leave, those pale bodies motionless on the ice, and then, one by one, they turned toward the cabin, toward the window where Elena was standing. She scrambled back, heart pounding, but not before she saw the nearest one smile. It had too many teeth. The back door opened. June came in, face flushed with cold, hands trembling as she removed her coat. She looked at Elena, standing in the middle of the room, pale and shaking, and her expression shifted. Understanding. Pity. I told you not to watch. What are they? Elena's voice came out as a whisper. We don't name them. June moved to the stove, began making tea with practiced automatic motions. Naming things give them power. They have enough of that already. How long has this been happening? Longer than the family's been here. They were old when the first Holbrook arrived, old when the natives lived here before that. Some things don't have beginnings, they just are. Elena looked at Ryan. He was staring at the floor, shoulders hunched, unable to meet her eyes. Why did you bring me here? She asked him. Why did you want me to see this? He didn't answer. Howard did. Because the offering isn't always food, the old man said. He was standing by the fireplace, face half in shadow. Some things, they want something more, something new. The pieces fell into place. The way the family had watched her all day, the way Howard had studied her, the way everyone had accepted her presence so easily. I'm the offering, she said. No. Ryan's head snapped up. No, that's not. You're not the offering. June's voice was calm. Too calm. You're a candidate. There's a difference. What difference? They choose. Howard drained his glass. We bring someone new, someone from outside the family, and they decide if they want them. If they do, they take them. If they don't, then you become family. For real. The marriage happens, the children come, and the cycle continues. Elena looked at the faces around her. Marcus and Terry. Terry, who'd been an outsider once too, who'd been evaluated, who'd passed whatever test those things administered. And if they take me? Silence. Then we're sorry, June said finally. Truly, but better you than one of us. Elena ran. She didn't think about her coat, her keys, anything, just bolted for the front door, threw it open and sprinted into the night. The cold hit her like a wall, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. The car was there, right there, 20 feet away. She could make it. She could get out. She reached the car, pulled the handle. Locked. Ryan had the keys. The one that had smelled her. It looked at Elena with those impossible eyes, reached out one too long hand and touched her face. Its fingers were cold, so cold they burned. Then it smiled, that terrible too many teeth smile, and it turned and followed the others back to the lake. Elena stood there shaking as the last of them vanished beneath the ice, as the surface of the lake went still and silent, as the clicking faded into nothing. June was beside her suddenly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, guiding her back toward the cabin. "They didn't take you," she said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. "In 40 years, I've never seen them refuse. What does that mean?" June looked at her, looked at Ryan, who was standing on the porch with tears streaming down his face. "It means you're family now," she said. "For better or worse. It means you're one of us." Elena let herself be led inside. Let them give her hot tea and blankets and soft words that meant nothing. And that night, lying awake in Ryan's arms, she made herself a promise. She would learn everything about this family, about the lake, about the things that lived beneath the ice. And then, she would burn it all down. The GPS had been wrong before. That's what Marcus kept telling himself as he pulled onto yet another unmarked dirt road in the middle of the New Mexico desert. Technology wasn't perfect. Satellites drifted. Software glitched. There was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why their navigation system kept trying to send them into the middle of nowhere. "It's doing it again," Jenna said from the passenger seat, her voice tight with frustration. "Marcus, it's doing it again!" He looked at the screen. The blue line of their route had shifted, no longer pointing toward Albuquerque and her parents' house, but veering off into the empty brown expanse to the east. A destination marker pulsed to the end of the new route, somewhere in the desert, miles from any town or road. "I see it." He pulled over, gravel crunching under the tires. "Give me a second." This was the 4th time in 2 hours. Every time he corrected the route, manually entering her parents' address, the GPS accepted the change, for a while. Then, slowly, the destination would shift, the blue line would curve, and they'd find themselves heading toward those same coordinates in the desert. "Maybe we should just use my phone," Jenna said. "We tried that. It did the same thing." "Then maybe we should stop using navigation at all. I know the way from here." "Sort of." Marcus looked out at the landscape surrounding them. Red rock formations in the distance, scrubby desert vegetation clinging to sandy soil, a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Beautiful in an alien sort of way. And empty. Completely, utterly empty. "We're still 3 hours out," he said. "If we get lost without navigation..." "We're already lost. The GPS is broken or possessed or something." "Possessed?" He tried to make it sound like a joke. Jenna didn't laugh. She'd been on edge since they crossed into New Mexico, though she couldn't explain why. Just a feeling, she'd said, a sense that something wasn't right. Marcus had dismissed it as pre-wedding stress. Meeting the future in-laws was stressful enough without adding holiday pressure and a 12-hour road trip. But now, sitting in their rental car on a road that didn't appear on any map, watching their GPS insist they needed to drive into the empty desert, he was starting to wonder. "Let me try something," he said. He opened the GPS settings, found the stored destinations, and deleted everything, cleared the cache, rebooted the device. When it came back on, he carefully entered Jenna's parents' address, double-checking each digit. The route calculated, a clean blue line to Albuquerque. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay, I think that..." The screen flickered. The route redrew itself, and once again they were being directed into the desert, toward coordinates that had no business being in their navigation system. Jenna grabbed his arm. "Marcus, look at the destination." He looked. The coordinates were displayed at the top of the screen, and below them, a name. Marcus and Jenna. His blood went cold. "I didn't type that. I didn't... How would it even know our names?" Jenna was already unbuckling her seatbelt, opening her door. "I'm calling my parents. I'm telling them we're turning around. This is insane." "Jenna, wait!" But she was already out of the car, phone in hand, walking a few steps away to get whatever signals she could find in this dead zone. Marcus watched her through the windshield, watched her hold the phone up to her ear, watched her face shift from frustrated to confused to something close to fear. She walked back to the car slowly, got in, closed the door. What did they say? Nothing. Her voice was strange, hollow. Because the phone didn't ring, it played a recording. Coordinates, the same ones on the GPS, over and over, just reading them out, like a voice I've never heard. Marcus grabbed the phone from her hand, hit redial, pressed it to his ear. 34.9721 north, a voice said. It was calm, genderless, mechanical, but not quite robotic. 106.3842 west, 34.9721 north, 106.3842 west. He hung up. His hands were shaking. "We need to get out of here," Jenna said. "Now, right now. I don't care if we have to drive all night without navigation. We need to leave." He agreed. He started the car, put it in gear. The engine died. Not sputtered, not coughed, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The dashboard went dark, the GPS went dark, even the radio, which had been playing low in the background, cut out mid-song. Marcus turned the key. Nothing. Not even the click of a starter trying to engage. "No," Jenna whispered. "No, no, no." He tried again. And again. The car was dead. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the wind outside, brushing against the windows like curious fingers. "We're out of cell range," Marcus said finally. "We haven't seen another car in over an hour, and I don't even know what road this is." "So what do we do?" He looked at the GPS screen, still dark. Looked out at the desert, stretching empty in every direction. Looked at the sun, already past its peak, beginning its slow descent toward evening. Winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Sunset would come early. "We have two choices," he said. "We wait here and hope someone comes along, or..." "Or what?" "Or we go to the coordinates, see what's there. Maybe it's, I don't know, a ranger station or something, somewhere with people who can help." Jenna stared at him. "You want to walk into the desert toward the mysterious location that something wants us to go to?" "I want to not die of exposure in a dead car in the middle of nowhere. And if it's a trap, if there's something out there that's been luring us, then at least we'll know what it is." It wasn't a good argument. He knew that. But sitting here, helpless, felt worse than moving toward the unknown. At least walking gave an agency. At least it felt like a choice. Jenna was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her door. "We stay together," she said. "No matter what. And if anything feels wrong, wronger than this already feels, we turn back." Agreed. They gathered what supplies they had: water bottles, granola bars, a flashlight. Jenna's phone, useless for calls, but maybe functional as a camera if they needed to document whatever they found. The coordinates, according to the GPS before it died, were roughly 6 miles east. That was walkable if they moved quickly. They could make it before sunset. Marcus took Jenna's hand. She squeezed back, her grip tight enough to hurt. They started walking. The desert swallowed them whole. The first hour wasn't so bad. The terrain was flat, the footing solid, and the air was dry enough that the cold felt manageable. They walked in silence mostly, saving their breath, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. But as the sun dropped lower, the shadows started to lengthen, and Marcus began to notice things. Little things at first, rocks that seemed to have moved when he looked away, scrub brush that rustled without any wind, a distant sound almost below the threshold of hearing, like something humming just out of range. "Do you hear that?" Jenna asked. "Yeah. What is it?" "I don't know." They kept walking. The humming grew louder, or maybe closer. It was hard to tell direction out here where the flat landscape played tricks with sound. Then Jenna stopped. "Marcus?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Look." She was pointing at the ground, at their footprints stretching back the way they'd come. Except there was another set of prints now, larger than theirs, following the same path and ending about 20 feet behind them. Something had been walking behind them. Something had stopped when they stopped. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the desert. Nothing. No movement. No figure on the horizon. But the prints were there. Fresh. Real. "We need to keep moving. Faster now." They walked faster, almost jogging. The humming sound grew louder, taking on a rhythm, a pulse that seemed to sync with their heartbeats. And the prints kept appearing. Every time Marcus looked back, there were more of them, always stopping just behind where they stood. Like whatever was making them was matching their pace exactly, staying just out of sight. "It's hurting us," Jenna panted. "It's pushing us toward the coordinates." "I know. So we're doing exactly what it wants." "Do you want to stop? Turn around? Walk toward the thing making those prints?" She didn't answer. The sun touched the horizon. The sky turned orange, then red, then a bruised purple that seemed to seep color from the landscape. The temperature was dropping fast now. Their breath came in visible puffs. And ahead, finally, something broke the flat line of the desert. A structure, low and dark against the dying light, maybe half a mile away. "That's it," Marcus said. "That's the coordinates." They approached cautiously, the humming sound now so loud it seemed to come from inside their skulls. The structure took shape as they got closer. Not a building exactly, but something older. Stones arranged in a circle, about 30 feet across. And in the center, a hole. A pit, descending into the earth at an angle, too regular to be natural, too dark to see the bottom. "What is this place?" Jenna breathed. Marcus didn't know. It looked almost like a kiva, one of the ceremonial structures used by ancient Pueblo peoples, but wrong somehow. The proportions were off. The stones were too smooth, too precisely fitted. And there were no petroglyphs, no markings of any kind, just blank stone arranged in a perfect circle around that dark, waiting hole. The humming was coming from inside. "I don't want to go in there," Jenna said. "Marcus, I really don't want to go in there." "We're not going to." He stopped. Their phones were glowing. Both of them, simultaneously, screens lighting up with an incoming call. No caller ID, just those coordinates displayed where a phone number should be. Marcus looked at Jenna. She looked at him. He answered. "You came." The voice was the same one that had read the coordinates before. Calm, genderless, but warmer now, almost pleased. "We weren't sure you would." "What is this?" Marcus demanded. "What do you want from us?" "To show you. To share what we've seen. You were chosen, Marcus and Jenna. Out of so many, you were chosen to understand." "Chosen by what?" "Come down. See for yourself." The call ended. The humming intensified. And now there was light coming from the pit. Faint at first, then brighter, a pale blue glow that pulsed in time with the humming, illuminating the stone walls of the passage leading down. "No," said Jenna. "Absolutely not. We're leaving." "And going where? The car is dead. It's almost dark. We have no idea which way is civilization." "I don't care. I'd rather freeze to death out here than go into that hole." Marcus turned to face the desert, ready to agree, ready to take their chances with the cold and the dark and whatever was making those footprints. But there was something out there now. Standing at the edge of the stone circle, where the desert met the ancient structure, tall, thin, motionless, a silhouette against the dying light that didn't look quite human. Then another appeared beside it, and another. They rose from the desert like they'd been buried just beneath the surface, waiting for this moment. Dozens of them, ringing the circle, blocking any escape. "We don't want to hurt you." The voice came from everywhere now, from the phones, from the humming, from the pit itself. "We want to welcome you. Please, come down." The figures didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching with faces that Marcus couldn't quite see, features that seemed to shift every time he tried to focus on them. Jenna grabbed his hand. "Together," she said, "no matter what." He nodded. They approached the pit. The passage sloped downward at a gentle angle, the blue light growing brighter as they descended. The walls were smooth, seamless, made of the same stone as the circle above, but without any visible joints or seams. It was like walking into a structure that had been carved from a single impossible piece of rock. The humming was inside Marcus's chest now, vibrating his ribs, making his teeth ache. But it didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt almost welcoming, like being hugged by something vast and patient. The passage opened into a chamber. It was huge, cathedral huge, extending up into darkness that their flashlight couldn't penetrate. The walls glowed with that same blue light, but it wasn't coming from any visible source. It was the walls themselves, luminescent, alive with slow-moving patterns that looked almost like writing. And at the center of the chamber, something waited. Not a creature, not a machine, something in between. Something that looked like it had been grown rather than built, all curves and organic shapes, pulsing softly with light. "Hello," the voice came from the shape, warm and welcoming. "Thank you for coming." Marcus tried to speak, found he couldn't. His voice had abandoned him. Jenna stepped forward. "What are you?" "We are visitors, like you. We came here a very long time ago, from somewhere very far away. We've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you. For humans who could understand, who could carry our message." "What message?" The shape pulsed brighter. The patterns on the walls moved faster, coalescing into images, stars, galaxies, distances that made Marcus's mind reel. Civilizations rising and falling, worlds dying, something vast and dark moving between the stars, consuming everything in its path. "Something is coming," the voice said. "Not for centuries yet, but it is coming. We came to warn you, but we arrived too early. Your species wasn't ready, so we waited. We watched, and we chose messengers." "Why us?" Marcus found his voice. "Out of everyone on Earth, why us?" "Because you were willing to follow. Most aren't. They ignore the signs, dismiss the impossibilities. They cling to their understanding of the world, even when that understanding fails them." The shape extended something toward them, an appendage, a tendril. It held two small objects, glowing with the same blue light as everything else. Take these. Share what you've seen. Not all at once, they won't believe you, but slowly, carefully, plant seeds of understanding. Jenna looked at Marcus. He looked at her. What happens if we say no? She asked. Then we wait for others. We have time, but your species doesn't have as much as you think. Marcus reached out, took one of the objects. It was warm in his hand, and it felt less like holding something than like connecting to something, a vast network of knowledge and memory barely contained in this small glowing shape. Jenna took the other. The humming changed, became something almost like music, something that felt like gratitude. Go now. Your vehicle will work. Your path will be clear. But remember what you've seen. Remember what's coming. The chamber began to dim. The patterns on the walls slowed, faded. The shape at the center contracted, retreating into itself like a flower closing at nightfall. Marcus and Jenna climbed. The passage seemed shorter going up. The stone circle was empty now, the figures gone. The desert was silent, the stars just beginning to emerge in a sky that had gone fully dark. They walked back to the car in silence. It started on the first try. The GPS showed a clear route to Albuquerque. Just the route, no mysterious coordinates, no strange destinations. They drove through the night without speaking, the glowing objects hidden in their pockets, pulsing faintly like second heartbeats. It was almost dawn when Jenna finally broke the silence. What do we do now? Marcus didn't have an answer. He thought about the images he'd seen, the civilizations, the darkness between stars, the warning that had waited underground for thousands of years. He thought about trying to explain any of it to anyone, to their parents, to their friends, to the world. We do what it said, he answered finally. Slowly, carefully, we find people who are willing to listen. And if no one believes us, then we find better ways to show them. We have time, not much, but some. Jenna pulled the object from her pocket. In the dim light of the car, it glowed softly, patterns moving across its surface like thoughts, like dreams. Do you regret it, following the coordinates? Marcus thought about it, really thought. No, he said. Whatever that was, whatever we saw, it was real. And now we know something that almost no one else knows. That has to mean something. Or we're both insane. That's possible too. She almost smiled. Almost. It was the closest either of them had come to normal since they'd crossed into New Mexico. They arrived at her parents' house just as the sun was rising. Christmas lights still twinkled on the roofline. A wreath hung on the door. Normal. Safe. A world that didn't know what was waiting in the desert, what was coming from between the stars. We don't tell them, Jenna said. Not yet. Not today. Agreed. They sat in the driveway for a moment, watching the house, watching the ordinary world go about its ordinary business. Merry Christmas Eve, Jenna said softly. Merry Christmas Eve. She leaned over and kissed him. It felt like an anchor, like something to hold on to when everything else had become uncertain. They got out of the car, walked to the door, rang the bell. Jenna's mother answered, face bright with excitement, arms already open for hugs. You made it! I was starting to worry. How was the drive? Jenna glanced at Marcus. Uneventful, she said. We just followed the GPS. They went inside. The door closed behind them, and in their pockets, unseen, the objects pulsed with patient light, counting down towards something the world wasn't ready to see. Not yet, but soon. The first gift appeared on December 19th. Nadia found it when she came home from work, sitting on the doormat of apartment 4B like it had every right to be there. A small box wrapped in silver paper, tied with a black ribbon. No tag, no card, No indication of who had left it or why. She looked up and down the hallway. Empty. The building was quiet, most residents either still at work or already gone at the holidays. Just fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the distant sound of someone's television bleeding through thin walls. Nadia picked up the box. It was light. She shook it gently and heard something shift inside. Something small, solid, moving across cardboard. "Weird," she muttered. She took it inside. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the Christmas tree in the corner, the one she'd put up alone because Derek had been too busy to help. Too busy with work, too busy with his phone, too busy with whatever kept pulling him away from her these days, leaving her alone in an apartment that felt smaller every month. 2 years they'd been together. 2 years of gradually realizing that the man she'd moved in with wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with. Or maybe he was, and she just hadn't been paying attention. She set the box on the kitchen counter and stared at it. Secret Santa wasn't a thing in their building. She didn't know most of her neighbors by name. Maybe it was a mistake. Wrong apartment. Someone would probably come looking for it. She left it on the counter and started making dinner, trying not to think about whether Derek would be home to eat it. He'd said he would. He usually said he would, and then something would come up. A late meeting, drinks with colleagues, a crisis that only he could solve. She was halfway through chopping onions when curiosity won. The ribbon slid off easily. The paper tore along crisp fold lines. Inside was a plain cardboard box, and inside that, resting on a bed of cotton, was a key. An old key, brass, tarnished, the kind that might open an antique jewelry box or a diary from another century. Attached to it was a small tag with neat, handwritten letters. The desk drawer, bottom left. Nadia's blood went cold. Derek's desk, the one in the corner of their bedroom, where he worked late into the night, where she wasn't supposed to bother him, where she'd never thought to look, because she trusted him. Trusted him. She stood there for a long moment, the key cold in her palm, the tag's words burning into her brain. Part of her wanted to throw it away, pretend she'd never found it, preserve whatever peace remained in their crumbling relationship. But she'd never been good at ignoring things. She walked to the bedroom. Derek's desk was neat, organized, everything in its proper place. Laptop closed, papers stacked. A photo of them from their first vacation together, back when he still looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. The bottom left drawer had a lock. She'd noticed it before, assumed it was just the way the desk was made, had never questioned why a desk drawer would need a lock. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a phone. Not Derek's regular phone. She knew that one, had held it 1,000 times. This was different. Prepaid. Cheap. The kind of phone people bought when they didn't want to be traced. She turned it on. The messages loaded slowly, one after another, a cascade of texts spanning months. Names she didn't recognize, times when Derek should have been at work, should have been with her. Photos she couldn't unsee. Nadia sat on the floor of her bedroom and read through the wreckage of her relationship. When Derek came home 2 hours later, she was waiting for him in the living room, the phone in her hand. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. He looked at the phone, looked at her, and something in his face shifted. Guilt giving way to anger, fear masking itself as indignation. "Where did you find that?" "Someone left it for me. In a box. With a key to your drawer." "Someone left..." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Nadia, whatever you think you saw..." "I saw everything, Derek. The texts. The photos. The hotel receipts you saved for some reason, like you wanted to be caught. That's not... I can explain." "Don't." The word came out sharp, final. She was surprised by how steady she felt, how clear. The pain would come later, she knew. The tears and the anger and the grief. But right now, all she felt was cold certainty. I want you out by morning. Nadia, please, we can talk about this. It didn't mean anything, it was just out by morning. He stared at her, saw something in her face that told him arguing was pointless. Nodded once, slowly. Fine, but whoever sent you that, whoever's trying to destroy us, you should ask yourself why. People don't do things like this for no reason. He retreated to the bedroom to pack. Nadia sat on the couch, the burner phone still in her hand, and stared at the silver wrapping paper on the kitchen counter. He was right about one thing. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had known about the affair, known about the locked drawer, known exactly how to tear her life apart. The second gift appeared the next morning. Same silver paper, same black ribbon, same spot on the doormat, like it had materialized overnight. Derek was gone. He'd packed a bag and left around midnight, muttering about staying with a friend, about coming back when she'd calmed down. The apartment felt emptier than it should have, quieter, like the walls were holding their breath. Nadia picked up the box with trembling hands. She shouldn't open it. Whatever game someone was playing, she didn't have to participate. She could throw it away, move on, start rebuilding the life that had crumbled around her. But the first gift had told the truth. What if this one did too? Inside was a photograph. Old, faded. The colors shifted toward yellow and orange the way photos from the 70s always did. It showed a couple standing in front of this building. This exact building, with the same brick facade and the same iron fire escapes. The woman in the photo was beautiful. Dark hair, bright smile, eyes that sparkled with joy. The man beside her was as handsome in a forgettable way. Average height, average build, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. On the back, handwritten, Apartment 4B, 1978. Ask the building manager about the previous tenants. Nadia found herself in the basement office of Harold Chen before she'd fully decided to go there. Harold had been the building manager for as long as anyone could remember. He was ancient, wrinkled, with hands that shook when he poured his endless cups of tea. But his eyes were sharp, and his memory was sharper. Previous tenants of 4B? He squinted at the photograph she'd handed him. Where'd you get this? Someone left it for me. I don't know who. Harold was quiet for a long moment. His fingers traced the edges of the photo like he was touching something precious or something painful. I know this couple, he said finally. Warren and Diane Marsh. They lived in 4B for about 3 years back in the late 70s. What happened to them? Harold set the photo down, looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Warren was a piece of work, charming on the surface, rotten underneath. Cheated on Diane constantly, but she kept taking him back, kept believing he'd change. That sounds familiar? It usually does, Harold sighed. One day, Diane just disappeared. Warren said she'd left him, moved back to her family in Wisconsin, but nobody ever confirmed that. And Warren moved out a few weeks later, middle of the night, didn't even give notice. Nadia felt cold. You think something happened to her? I think a lot of things, but thinking and proving are different animals. Harold handed the photo back. Why are you digging into this? Ancient history can't help you. Someone wants me to know. Someone's sending me these gifts, these clues. I don't know why, but they're not random. The first one showed me my boyfriend was cheating. This one. This one what? I don't know yet. She thanked Harold and went back upstairs, the photograph heavy in her pocket. The apartment felt different now, weighted with history she hadn't known existed. She looked at the walls, the floors, the corners where shadows gathered, and wondered what had happened here, what secrets the building had absorbed over decades of human drama. That night, she dreamed of a woman with dark hair and a bright smile, standing in her kitchen, looking at her with eyes full of desperate urgency. The woman's mouth moved, forming words Nadia couldn't hear. She woke up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, sheets damp with sweat. The third gift was waiting on her nightstand. She hadn't heard anyone come in, hadn't heard a door open or footsteps approach, but there it was. Silver paper, black ribbon, a tag that read simply, "Under the floorboards, bedroom closet." Nadia sat up slowly. The apartment was dark, silent, the kind of quiet that feels like pressure against your eardrums. She should have been afraid. Someone had been in her apartment while she slept. Someone had stood over her bed and left a gift inches from her face. But she wasn't afraid. Not exactly. She was beginning to understand. The closet floor was old hardwood, scratched and worn from decades of use. In the back corner, barely visible unless you were looking for it, one of the boards sat slightly higher than the others. Nadia got a butter knife from the kitchen and pried it up. Underneath was a space, a hollow between the floor and the ceiling of the apartment below. And in that hollow was a bundle of fabric, wrapped around something solid. She pulled it out, unwrapped it carefully. Letters, dozens of them, tied together with a ribbon that had once been white but had yellowed with age. And beneath the letters, a journal, leather-bound, initials pressed into the cover. D.M. Diane Marsh. Nadia opened the journal to the last entry. December 21st, 1978. Warren knows I'm going to leave him. He found the bus ticket I bought, the bag I packed. He didn't yell, didn't hit me, just smiled, that cold, empty smile that means he's decided something. I'm scared. I'm writing this and hiding it because I need someone to know. If something happens to me. The entry ended there, mid-sentence, unfinished. Nadia read through the night. The letters were from Diane's sister, full of concern and offers of help. "Come home," they said. "He's not going to change. You deserve better." The journal painted a picture of a woman trapped. Warren had isolated her from her family, controlled the money, made her believe she was worthless without him. Every entry was a small cry for help, a documentation of abuse that escalated slowly, invisibly, until it was too late. The last few pages were the worst. Diane had finally made plans to leave, had saved money in secret, bought a bus ticket, arranged to stay with her sister. She was going to wait until Warren left for work on December 22nd, and then she was going to run. She never made it. Nadia closed the journal as dawn light crept through the windows. Her hands were shaking, her eyes burned with tears she hadn't noticed shedding. Diane Marsh had lived in this apartment, had slept in this bedroom, had hidden her most precious possessions under these floorboards because she knew, somewhere deep inside, that she might not survive. And someone, something, wanted Nadia to know. The fourth gift arrived that afternoon. This one was different, larger, heavier. The silver paper was torn in places, like whatever was inside had sharp edges. Nadia opened it at the kitchen counter, hands steadier than they should have been. Inside was a box of old photographs, Polaroids mostly, the kind that developed in your hand, showing moments that should have been private. Warren and various women. Warren at bars, at hotels, at places Diane probably never knew he went. And at the bottom of the box, a newspaper clipping. Woman's remains found in construction site. The date was 1983, 5 years after Diane disappeared. The article described skeletal remains discovered during the excavation for a new parking structure 3 blocks from this building. The victim was female, estimated to be in her late 20s. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the skull. The remains were never identified. The case went cold. But Nadia knew. She knew with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond evidence. Diane Marsh hadn't gone back to Wisconsin. Diane Marsh had been murdered by her husband and buried in a vacant lot, and she'd stayed there, unknown and unmourned, for 5 years before even her bones were found. A phone number was written at the bottom of the newspaper clipping. Below it, in that same neat handwriting, Detective Morrow, retired. He never stopped wondering. Nadia picked up her phone and dialed. Detective Frank Morrow was 83 years old and living in a nursing home in Skokie. But his voice was clear when he answered, and his memory, for certain things, was razor sharp. "The parking lot remains," he said when Nadia explained why she was calling. "I worked that case for 2 years. Never could prove anything, but I always suspected the husband. Warren Marsh. Slippery bastard. Had an alibi for everything, an answer for everything. And those eyes." What about his eyes? Empty, like looking into a window with nothing behind it. I've seen a lot of killers in my time. He was one of the worst because he was so damn good at hiding it. "Do you know what happened to him after Diane disappeared?" "Moved to Seattle, far as I know. Changed his name, remarried a few times." Morrow paused. "Why are you asking about this, miss? This case is older than you are." Nadia told him about the gifts, the key, the photograph, the journal hidden under the floorboards. Morrow was quiet for a long moment. "Someone's helping you," he said finally. "Or something. Either way, if you've got that journal, if you've got Diane's own words, that's more than we ever had. That's evidence." "Evidence of what? The man's probably dead by now." "Maybe, maybe not. But Diane deserves to be remembered. She deserves to have her story told." That night, Nadia sat in her apartment with the journal open on her lap and the photographs spread across the coffee table. The Christmas tree lights blinked in the corner, cheerful and absurd against the weight of what she'd learned. She should have felt alone. Derek was gone. Her life had collapsed in the space of a week. She was sitting in an apartment where a woman had been murdered, or at least where her murder had been planned. But she didn't feel alone. There was a presence in the apartment. Not threatening, not cold, just there, watching, waiting. "Diane?" Nadia said softly. "Is that you?" The lights flickered, just once. Could have been electrical, could have been anything. "I found your journal. I know what he did, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." The air in the apartment shifted, warmed, like a held breath being released. Nadia opened her laptop and began to write. She wrote about Diane Marsh, the woman who disappeared from apartment 4B in December 1978. She wrote about Warren, the charming monster who killed his wife and buried her like garbage. She wrote about Detective Morrow and his decades of suspicion. She wrote about the gifts that had led her here, the strange and impossible kindness of a ghost who had saved her from her own Warren before it was too late. She emailed the story to journalists, to cold case investigators, to true crime podcasters who might take an interest. She scanned the journal pages and attached them as evidence. And then she went to bed. She dreamed of Diane again, but this time the woman wasn't desperate. She was smiling, standing in a doorway that led somewhere bright, somewhere Nadia couldn't see. "Thank you," Diane mouthed. And then she was gone. Nadia woke on Christmas morning to sunlight streaming through the windows and a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. The apartment felt different, lighter, like something that had been stuck for a very long time had finally come unstuck. There was one last gift on the kitchen counter. Silver paper, black ribbon, but this one had a tag that said simply, "For you." Inside was a brass key, not old and tarnished like the first one, but new, bright, and attached to it was a note. The apartment on the 5th floor is available. New year, new start. Nadia laughed. It came out strangled, half a sob, but it was still a laugh. She looked around the apartment one last time, at the closet where Diane's secrets had been hidden, at the bedroom where Derek had kept his, at the kitchen where she'd stood alone so many nights, wondering why she wasn't enough. "Thank you," she said to the empty room, "for everything." The lights flickered once more. A goodbye. Nadia packed her bags that afternoon. She didn't take much, just clothes, books, the journal that she'd give to Detective Morrow once the investigators were done with it. The rest she left behind. Let the next tenant deal with Derek's furniture, Derek's memories, Derek's ghost. She was done with ghosts. Well, almost done. On her way out, she stopped at the building manager's office. Harold looked up from his newspaper, unsurprised to see her. Moving out? Moving up. 5th floor, apparently. Harold smiled. It was the first time she'd seen him smile. Good apartment, good light, no history. He paused. You figured out what happened to Diane? I think so. The police are looking into it. Good. She deserved better than what she got. They all do. Nadia nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. Harold, do you know who was leaving me those gifts? The old man's smile faded. He looked at her for a long moment, something ancient and knowing in his eyes. Some buildings remember, he said finally. Some buildings take care of their own. He went back to his newspaper. Nadia walked out into the cold Chicago morning, keys to her new apartment clutched in her hand, ready to begin again.